right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the third installment of our Financial Health Equity Series. My name is Juliana Semper, and I'm Director of Market Innovation at the Financial Health Network. Today's conversation is about closing the racial wealth gap through tech, community, and empowerment. As we know, the racial wealth disparities are longstanding and substantial and have become more evident in the past 2 years. According to the most recent research from the Federal Reserve, white households earn twice as much as the average Black household, and the net worth of white households is 8 times as high as that of Black households. The disparities in wealth aren't only about understanding the difference between personal finances at a group level, but also what the social, emotional, and cultural implications are. Understanding how the money flows within a community, the difference in access to opportunities, or the freedom to make choices, just to name a few. Next slide, please. Today, we have invited Stackwell, an Accelerator alum from our Financial Solutions Lab, to have an honest conversation about what it means to them to create generational wealth through investing. Joining us today are Stackwell's founder and CEO, Trevor Rozier-Burt, and Vice President of Product, Omosefe Ayef-Bomwan. They will share how they are working to empower the Black community to invest. They will also talk about the social, emotional, and cultural barriers that stand in the way of long-term wealth building behaviors and what it will take to create meaningful change for Black families. They will also touch on some product insights and effective marketing tactics to improve the financial health of underrepresented communities. Finally, a few housekeeping items before we get started. Questions are welcome throughout the presentation, so feel free to drop them in the Q&A, which you can find located in the taskbar at the bottom. And following the presentation, we will share both the slide deck and the recording of the webinar with everyone who registered. And so without further ado, let's get started. All right, welcome, Trevor. Thanks so much for being here. We're very excited to learn more about Stackwell and your journey.
Thank you for having me, Juliana. Excited to be here. Omosefe and I are excited to be here and have this conversation with you all today.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and maybe a little bit more about what inspired you to start Stackwell.
Absolutely. So I'll go back in the story a little bit and just talk about some of my professional background and experience because it's instructive to why I ultimately decided to found Stackwell and build the business that we're building. I started my career in New York as a corporate transactional lawyer, mostly doing public and private securities offerings work. I did a lot of work representing fund sponsors in the hedge fund, private equity, mutual fund, and ETF spaces. Sort of early in my career, moved back here to Boston, where I am now, but still was practicing in the law. And transitioned a bit to do M&A, venture capital, and startup company work, but then went in-house to State Street about 6 years ago and made the transition over to the business side at that point in time. Still obviously very much focused on finance and asset management. And I helped through leading a major acquisition at State Street, build the fintech business at the bank, and ultimately was the head of strategy and business development for that business before I left about 24 months ago to found Stackwell. And ultimately for me, I got to this inflection point in my career where I felt like I was ready to take this next step in my leadership journey. I also, for what it's worth, I started to think about things in transition right around or just before the pandemic. And certainly those thoughts and conversations I was having were accelerated by what I saw transpiring within my community, and certainly the inflection point of George Floyd contributed to this as well. And what I really saw was, there were a lot of people out there talking about the racial wealth gap as if this was a new problem, right? Mm-hmm. And as if it didn't exist in our country for hundreds of years, frankly. And I felt as though the conversation, the solutions that were being brought to market weren't likely to solve the problem. And what I thought was squarely missing from that dialogue was any meaningful discussion about long-term investing as a means to help people grow and amass wealth over time. As I mentioned, I spent the entirety of my career in and around the financial markets. I helped build a lot of wealth for a lot of people that didn't, frankly, look like myself and almost FA. And I thought that that was a problem. When I looked at the conversation, I saw people holding out replacement banking options and crypto as two main examples as ways in which people could sort of secure their financial futures. And don't get me wrong, like 50% of the Black population is either unbanked or underbanked. And so we need better banking solutions. The challenge, though, that I saw was people were holding that out as a means to help individuals in the community grow and amass wealth. And we know from a business perspective, that's fundamentally not possible, right? Because in order to build wealth, you have to have access to passive streams of income that are going to compound over time. Similarly with crypto, not going to weigh in on the merits of crypto, certainly not at this moment in time. But my perspective on it was everything about investing is that you need to have an understanding that it is a risk continuum, right? And crypto is certainly at the farthest end of the risk continuum. And when you're talking about a community of people that are largely underinvested, don't have significant asset bases from which to withstand risk, it just didn't seem like the right first step to me. And so what my career had taught me along the way was the market, as I said before, is actually a really powerful tool. There are sustainable ways to participate. It doesn't actually require a tremendous amount of investment knowledge, understanding, acumen, or capital to actually participate and do well. And I thought that if we could just get better tools, better education, and frankly, increase the confidence to empower more people to believe like they could participate and try, that it would be a very powerful tool to help people start to grow and amass a bit more wealth and frankly, transform their outcomes as a result. So that's a bit about me, a bit about why I started. But yeah, just super excited to spend some time with you all today and dive into the details.
Yeah, and I love what you shared about confidence, because that's definitely one of the areas that is very important in terms of handling your finances, knowing what products are out there and feeling confident taking the decision at the next step. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And so I would like to know, or we would like to know maybe a little bit more about the philosophy and the values that are currently guiding your company. If you could share a little bit more about that.
For sure. You know, for us, we talk all the time about how we as a company view the racial wealth gap as a social justice issue of our time. And I mentioned earlier that part of the catalyst to founding the company was what I saw actually transpiring on TV in my community and the like. And, you know, the reality is, I believe that the racial wealth gap directly impacts every other material issue that exists or people are concerned about in Black and Brown communities. You think about things like access to affordable housing, healthcare, quality education, food insecurity issues, criminal justice reform, right? The list goes on and on and on. But the reality is, like, access to capital or lack thereof directly impacts a person's ability to control outcomes in each of those areas that I just discussed. And so to me, in a real way, I felt like, why are we continuing to wait for other people to do right by us? Why are we in the streets demanding better equity, better outcomes? Like, one of the things that I have learned in my career is that people that have access to capital can shape and direct the outcomes that matter to them. And so a large part of what Stackwell is about, it's, you know, not just let's deliver a trading application to get people into the market so they can, you know, generate returns for the sake of generating returns. It's, no, let's get more money into the hands of a community of people that can then leverage that capital to have greater agency and control to direct the outcomes that matter for them and for their families for generations to come. And so when you talk about values with respect to the company, it is all about inspiring and encouraging people to understand that they belong in this space and that this is their pathway to having greater agency, to being able to direct the outcomes that matter. And so we see ourselves, we are about positioning ourselves as a guide, as a partner to our users that are going to walk along this journey with them and ultimately help them achieve both the financial and personal outcomes and dreams that they have for themselves and their futures for years to come.
I absolutely love what you just said about essentially what is empowering people to drive the outcomes and through the power of just managing their assets, right? Like where the ability to vote with their money. And so, yeah, I love that. So I know that you and Omosefe prepared some slides for how you're putting your philosophy into action at Stackwell. So I'll let you take over the stage. But just a reminder for our audience that we'll have time after the presentation for a few questions. So feel free to use the Q&A feature. And so, yeah, Trevor and Omosefe, it's all you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And Omosefe is now on screen and joining me. So excited again for both of us to be here. I'll just get started here, just kind of laying context of some of the early research that we did that helped frame our perspective around addressing this problem. I mentioned in my open remarks that the wealth gap is not a new problem. And one of the stats that has really stuck out to me, likely because of my legal background and training, is that when you look at the Civil Rights Act, which is like a watershed moment in the history of our country, after which things certainly have gotten better, obviously more work to do, but it was a pivotal moment in the history of our country as it related to equity and inclusion. And just before the passage of the Civil Rights Act, the racial wealth gap in this country was 7x. As Juliana mentioned earlier, it is now currently sitting at 8x. But what is most troubling to me is the fact that when you dig into the details and look at the older millennial populations and certainly Gen Z populations, the problem is actually getting extremely worse, right? It has skyrocketed within those populations. And if we don't do something about this issue today, the impacts and the magnitude of it on an entire community and generation of people will be even more significant than it has already been. Now, with that said, I obviously came to this problem with the perspective around investing in the market and understanding what that could mean for a community of people. And when you dive into those details, you see the rate of under-participation in the markets by Black families is significant. Only about a third of Black families are invested in the market today as compared to 2/3 of white families. And when you look at the relative performance of the S&P 500 over the last decade coming into this year, the market was up almost 280%, right? And so again, the missed opportunity by not participating is extremely significant, but also understandable, right? You have to take into context some of the social, emotional, and cultural barriers to entry that exist within this community. And that is explicitly what we have set out to address alongside the delivery of tech, alongside the delivery of education. If we could go to the next slide. So for us, it is not just about the application that we are delivering to people. It is also everything that we have done in our business is centered around community, right? I just will give a quick aside in a second to talk about how important I believe that this is, but really at the end of the day, I believe this comes down to increasing representation in this space, right? So more people in the Black community need to see themselves in the financial markets. They need to see themselves being successful and understand that they have a right, they have a seat at the table and the ability to participate maybe in ways in which they never have before. One of the big insights that we uncovered in the process of research and our own lived experiences, as well as just early feedback from potential users, which Omosefe will get into in more detail in a second, is that there is just a profound amount of angst and anxiety associated with the investment decision-making process. So you Think about any trading app that's out there that just allows people to have a do-it-yourself experience. They are generally presented with a universe of 10,000 listed securities, and how do they decide? Where do they start, right? And because there's uncertainty, a lot of times people opt out and don't participate. And so to me, the way in which we can address this challenge, the way in which we can drive comfortability with this process is to share stories, to share experiences and feedback, to allow people to see ordinary, everyday folks like themselves doing this thing that they otherwise thought was not accessible. I mentioned I would tell a quick story. For me, as I said before, I started my career as a corporate transactional lawyer. The first deal I ever did in my career was an IPO for one of Bob Johnson's companies, one of the first Black billionaires in this country. And I will never forget, I was at the financial printer in DC working all hours, representing the underwriters on the deal. And everybody that was sitting at the table on my side of the deal was an older white male. Everybody that was on his executive management team looked like me. And I will never forget that the CEO of the company and the CFO, who's now the CEO, came up to me in the room one night, and they just asked me who I was, why I was there, what it was I was trying to achieve in my career. And in that moment, I started to believe that I could do what they were doing. I believed that I could be a leader of a company one day. I believed that maybe I could take a company public. And frankly, that experience has shaped and directed my career for the last 10 to 15 years since that experience happened, and has given me the confidence to know that, there's certain experiences, there's certain skill sets that I needed to develop to help me realize this goal that I had never even seen before in my career, and frankly have never seen since, right? And so I have truly lived the power of representation, and I know how important it is for people in our community to continue to see examples like that, which is why we have been so hyper-focused on the development of an ecosystem of community around Stackwell while we are simultaneously bringing our product to market. So I will come back to our go-to-market strategy in a bit. I'll stop there. I'll let Omosefe jump in and talk about some of the early learnings that we have from a user research perspective and how that has informed the development of the product to date. And then, we can jump back into some of the go-to-market strategy after that.
Awesome. Thanks, Trevor. Next slide. Next slide. Great. So as Trevor mentioned earlier, our understanding of the barriers to investing are grounded in insights from our lived experience and also validated by extensive user research. So just quickly sharing, a little bit about myself before I dive into some of the findings here. I guess on a personal front, I'm a first-generation Nigerian American, the eldest daughter of 6. And I think part of what drew me to Stackwell was just how well the mission sought to address some of the problems that I had experienced firsthand and also witnessed in my immediate community of family and friends. And I think, and Trevor talked about this a bit, but I think at Stackwell, we really believe that proximity to the problem and our end users will be critical components of our ability to deliver value to our community. So in order to tackle this issue of underinvestment, the problem statement that Trevor just opened the presentation with, we obviously sought to take a data-driven approach to better understand some of the customer pain points. So we conducted a nearly 800-person representative market landscape study to assess current consumer investment and financial management habits, practices, and attitudes. And what we found was that when it came to investing, as we kind of mentioned earlier, the need for financial education was a key sticking point for many of the folks that we surveyed, with over half of respondents describing this as their number one pain point. Also of note, the need for a simplified and clear process for investing was highlighted as a number one sticking point, with nearly 30% of respondents noting a lack of familiarity with the process and a feeling of overwhelm due to kind of the dense and feature-rich products that were currently in the marketplace as a key kind of barrier to trialability. Next slide. And so with respect to attitudes towards investing, a few key themes also emerged. lack of urgency towards getting started. So nearly 2/3 of our demographic believed that they can actually afford to wait. Secondly, a desire for mission alignment. And so it was interesting to see, although unsurprising, frankly, that nearly 80% of our respondents sought to support Black-owned businesses. And lastly, one of the key things we mentioned or we noticed was discomfort with investing, coupled with a strong desire to learn. So over 55% of respondents noted a lack of confidence with investing, while 80% indicated a willingness to learn. So in setting out to build this product, our goal was simple. How do we build a solution that addresses the acute pain points felt in our community and ultimately become a vehicle for positive and sustainable wealth building behavior? Next slide. So as I mentioned, we kind of distilled our insights into 3 key pain points, all of which are rooted in a lack of proximity to the wealth building process. The first is around a lack of guidance. So folks feeling that they, were overwhelmed with the process and didn't quite know where to start. And so in response, our solution eliminated the stress and anxiety of do-it-yourself investing using model portfolios that were recommended based on a user's goals and risk tolerance. Secondly, we wanted to address the lack of information. And so folks feeling like they didn't understand the investment process and couldn't find information that was relevant to them. So our solution includes educational content that's intentionally crafted to guide, inform, and empower our customers about financial literacy and investment fundamentals. And lastly, it was around one of the pain points we tried to address was around kind of a lack of safety, a lack of a safety net, and sort of a heightened sense of risk and loss aversion. So feeling like investing is too expensive and folks not wanting to lose money. So we really wanted to prioritize building a product that was affordable and accessible with $10 account minimums and only a $1 monthly charge, and leverage behavioral nudges built to reduce barriers to trialability and increase long-term commitment. Next slide. So in designing our product, we prioritized a few key principles: accessibility, transparency, and above all else, intentionality. So from design choices to language and tone, our app was designed to demonstrate and reinforce a prioritization of our end user, the Black community. And when looking at the landscape of similar offerings, we knew it was important to earn our users' trust by demonstrating that this product was built with them in mind. And so throughout the user journey, we leveraged representative visuals that are shown here on the slide, such as the landing video that a user sees upon app open, to educational content images, as well as thoughtful iconography, to serve as a visual cue and reminder to our audience that this was a space for them. And in our early private beta, a couple of users actually noted, quote, "Stackwell feels like it understands who I am and what I'm looking for. Stackwell feels like a safe space to learn about topics that I hear about in the world around me, topics like inflation, risk, but don't feel included in." And interesting to note, in our first month post-launch, active user survey respondents actually cited mission alignment as their #1 reason for downloading the app. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, behavioral science and transparency were core components of our value prop. And so our approach in designing for behavioral change is really grounded in an awareness of both the promoting pressures and inhibiting pressures at play, which include a number of the culturally related pain points and goals described about a little bit ago. So to tackle the hesitation rooted in discomfort and mistrust, we were really purposeful about design choices such as the use of tooltips, which allow a user to kind of drill down via an icon and provide more information that are leveraged throughout the product to provide clarity and guidance. And further to this goal, one experiment that we're actually currently running or working on is inserting a product demo on the landing screen that offers a peek inside of the product and kind of further instruction with respect to what to expect, with the goal of converting inactive kind of spectator users who are kind of still kind of playing around in the app but don't want to commit, who still may be on the fence. Additionally, by integrating science-based nudges like the returns calculator that's featured here, which leverages temporal reframing and helps users visualize the impact of their behavior today with their goals for tomorrow, as well as milestone-based positive reinforcement, such as the motivational video, welcome video that's featured at the end of onboarding, as well as contribution acknowledgements based on a user's commitment. Our goal is to use information paired with nudges to help people make positive goal-aligned choices. Next. And while it's still early days, just over 2.5 months since our public release, we've really been excited to see some early evidence of progress towards our unit of impact, which is that increased investment participation rate in the Black community. Of note, Stackwell is actually resonating with folks across both the age and income spectrum, with 25 to 34-year-old aged users coming in as our largest user segment. Additionally, it was good to note that nearly half of our users actually reported an income greater than 100K, with an average AUM early on with 132 users per user, $132, excuse me, per user. So a healthy start and kind of a strong indication that folks that could have invested but were otherwise not participating are actually coming off the sidelines and choosing to invest in their future. Next slide. So to chat more about kind of how we've thought about go-to-market and meeting our users where they are, I'll pass it back to Trevor.
Thanks so much, Sefe. I appreciate that. You can go to the next slide really quick. Okay, perfect. So as was highlighted in some of Sefe's remarks there, we have seen a lot of really strong early indications that we've been able to identify our target audience through research, through the ways in which the product and we as a brand showed up in the community. And so now for us, it's all about growth, right? And so we believe that we have the strategy and roadmap for meeting and addressing this problem and growing an ever increasing audience and community as a result of community-based engagements and partnerships, content and media opportunities that we have, and further enhancements and engagement that we can drive through the app and our behavioral strategy. Next slide. I think the biggest thing for us, though, that is really differentiating and resonating with people, not only in the community, but the partners that sit alongside of us, is just the fact that we have been able to develop and build an ecosystem of participating entities that can drive significant growth and opportunity for Stackwell. The thing about our ecosystem, though, that I personally love is the diversity of the participants that are involved and the network effects that each drives to reinforce the core assets of Stackwell, which at the end of the day are content, educational content. So educational content and community are what will drive app downloads for us. They're also what drive partnership opportunities. And we'll get into some of these in a second. But for us, we look at partnerships to do 3 core things for us as we grow the business. It is 1, to drive brand awareness and traction, 2, to drive user engagement, and 3, to drive customer retention over time. Ultimately, though, the net effect of these partnerships and ecosystem participants that sit alongside of and around the Stackwell app will be to drive down our CAC while simultaneously contributing to the growth of our core assets. This is true when it comes to some of the MBA partnerships, which we'll highlight in a second, as well as the recent public announcement of our partnership with Prudential and the Student Freedom Initiative. But to get us started on just this notion of development and community, we'll talk a little bit about our Student Athlete Ambassador program, which we have started and has become a really effective early sales force, if you will, as we've continued to bring the product out to market. Next slide, please. So I'll give a little bit of background here, not sure how familiar everybody is with this space, but I'm a former college athlete. I love the fact that kids can now get paid for their name, image, and likeness. It also scares me to death because the more and more that I talk to students that are on campus right now, I understand that not many of them have the institutional support systems that they need to understand how to maximize this finite period of time. But because it is very much that for a lot of these students, to access and capture some capital that is in front of them to build their brands, to create access to opportunities, and to really set themselves and their families up for success as they move forward in their professional careers and endeavors. And so what started out as just me being out mentoring students that I had a natural affinity with, we were able to start an NIL student athlete ambassador program. We now have 35 or over 35 college athletes across about 18 colleges and universities in the country. We are working with those student athletes to help them be more prepared from a financial wellness perspective. So we provide monthly seminars and workshops that help them understand just the basics of financial planning, as well as investing in the market. We bring in speakers to talk to them about brand building. We create access to our network and opportunities for them to think about their long-term career goals. And in particular, one of our student athlete ambassadors from the University of Michigan worked with us this summer. He's a computer science major and worked with us on the development of the application and ultimately in the final stages as we brought the product to market. And so we view, and this is consistent with the values point that I made earlier in the conversation, like we're not just here to deliver an app. We are here to drive impact in this community. We are here to increase representation in this space, not only for investors, but for future leaders in the finance and asset management industry as well. And so that is what this community, this program is about. In terms of the impact that it has driven for us, we started this program probably in about February of 22, while we were still growing a wait list of potential users onto the app. Ultimately, by the time that we concluded this program, at least as it related to driving waitlist growth, our waitlist grew almost 250% last year. And the individuals in this program contributed almost about 70% of that growth. So an extremely powerful tool, a program we will continue to invest in, because at the end of the day, these individuals are out in localized ways, driving impact, having conversations, and bringing more people to bear as a result of the conversations that have been facilitated by Stackwell. One just quick story that I'll share about the impact of this program. We have a student athlete ambassador that just graduated from Georgetown last year. She was a soccer player, graduated, and is now off working at Google. But as a result of her experience in the program, she recruited her younger brother, who is now a freshman basketball player at Northwestern, to participate in the program. But more importantly, it helped foster and facilitate a dialogue that the two of them brought home and ultimately contributed to their grandmother starting to invest in the market and utilizing Stackwell because of what she saw in her grandchildren. And so like that's the type of intergenerational conversation and impact that we hope to have. And the community-based programs that we enter into will help facilitate those types of outcomes. Next slide, please. One of the other ways in which we have tried to show up in the communities and have impact is through a number of strategic partnerships with MBA and WNBA teams. I know on the face of it, you can look and say, oh, just another fintech doing a sports marketing deal, nothing to see here, but it is absolutely not about that for us. We look at the NBA as league, the teams, the players, same is true with the WNBA, as institutions that have extreme cultural relevance within the Black community. We also view them as leaders in the social justice conversation that's been taking place in our country for the better part of the last 2 to 3 years. And so for us, this was not about slapping the Stackwell logo inside of arenas or on apparel. It was about how can we find partners intentionally that are about this work, that are in the community, that we can show up alongside of and actually drive real impact and change. And so when you think about the cities in which we have decided to partner, it is Detroit, it is Minneapolis, it is New Orleans, Washington, DC, right? So 4 cities with extremely high concentration of our target demo, also 4 cities where the impacts of the racial wealth and income gap are most acute. And through our partnership with the teams, we're delivering financial literacy training and education programs. We're providing scholarship opportunities for graduating high school seniors as well as college students to help invest in their future and advancement. But every single person that participates in one of our programs alongside of these teams will get access to the Stackwell app. And that app will be preceded with capital that is contributed both by Stackwell and by our partner teams. Again, really trying to make very clear the investment that we are making in the individuals in these communities and the long-term commitment that we are making to their financial wellness and wealth building opportunities. Next slide, please. The last point that I had mentioned around seeding accounts is becoming very much a hallmark of the way in which we partner as an organization. Many of you may have seen that we recently announced a strategic partnership with Prudential Financial as well as the Student Freedom Initiative, where we are in collaboration with both organizations going to be providing seed capital to 500 students at HBCUs and minority serving institutions across the country. Prudential has so graciously put up the capital to get this process started. And through the SFI community and network of schools, we're able to reach students at 43 colleges and universities across the country. Ultimately, though, this program is going to enable us to do a couple of key things. One, give access to capital to folks that otherwise may not have had it, which we have seen through a ton of behavioral research, behavioral economics research shows that something as simple as seed capital and a commitment and an investment in a process lowers the barrier to entry and gives people greater confidence to participate in this program. We are going to be launching this program at the start of this year, and through access to education, through various interventions, workshops, and focus groups, we will be able to derive additional key insights around what can catalyze increased participation in the financial markets by some of the earliest wealth builders within the Black community. And just to highlight some of the things that we think about from an impact perspective in a program like this, I'll just highlight a few of those things. If we could go to the next slide. But really what we are looking at as it relates to this program and other sort of seeding arrangements that we enter into is how can we help promote the consistency of investment over time. What a lot of people don't talk about is actually the greatest tool that any of us have in terms of our ability to build wealth is in fact time, right? So if we can get people to consistently show up month over month, year over year, to even just small dollar incremental investments or contributions to their account, we know that it can have significant impacts over the long term. To give just a quick example of this, if you did nothing more than invest $1 a day, so $30 a month over the last 30 years, and you got the same rate of return that the S&P 500 has historically produced, which is about an 8.5% rate of return when adjusting for inflation, the net result of that would be that a person at the end of the period would have nearly 2 times more wealth than the median Black family has in this country today. Like, the process doesn't have to be any harder than that. And through programs like this, we hope to promote and facilitate the development of positive wealth building behaviors that are going to allow people to remain consistent, that are going to allow them to increase contribution amounts and investment frequency over time. And we'll continue to focus on activations inside and outside of the app that help people actually commit and do those very things. Next slide, please. Finally, just wanting to highlight some core metrics and KPIs that we think about as an organization. Certainly want to ensure that we are always delivering the best possible investment performance and experience for our users. Our models are based on a series of broad-based index ETFs that represent a couple of core foundational strategies that we believe are important to help get people broad exposure and a foundation to building their wealth through the markets. And as we go through continued sort of operating history over time, certainly looking to continue to grow AUM at a top line level, but ensuring that at an individual level as well, we are making positive strides in the contribution to an individual's ability to grow their wealth. We are extremely focused on controlling churn and growing in sustainable ways, and that comes down to how we think about optimizing our experience in terms of onboarding, and then maintaining people's commitments and persistence with this process over time, and really thinking about the ways in which we can continue to partner and expand our channel and reach through partnerships and other community-based activations to allow us to continue to create this holistic experience around Stackwell that includes more than just the app, more than just the education we're providing, and really provides a great end-to-end experience for our users. Next slide, please. So to stop there, again, super excited about all of the progress that we have made to date. Certainly appreciative of the partners that put their faith and trust in us and the ways in which we've been able to impact the lives of our early users. Again, Omosefe and I are appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you all today, and happy to answer any questions that the audience may have.
All right. Well, thank you so much to you both, Trevor and Omosefe. This has been very enlightening, and we do have a few questions from the audience, so I'm gonna start asking them. So one of the key barriers that was mentioned was education, and so wondering, do you feel self-directed or expert-led education is desired? Which one is desired more?
Yeah, why don't I start, and then Trevor, if you have anything to add, jump in. So I think one of the things that we discovered in our research, and that continues to be the case, is that there is a huge desire for guidance, right? Like that was one of the key pain points. Folks are overwhelmed and don't really know how to kind of, engage with information and education. And so I would say we kind of employ a combination of both. And so I would say it's user directed, but expertly crafted. And what I mean when I say that is we take advantage of the captive audiences we have. So that's our student ambassador program, asking them regularly kind of what are the topics that are top of mind. We also leverage social listening. And so looking at our social media platform that has a captive audience of followers who are constantly engaged, and take a look at what are the posts, the education related posts that is resonating the most with people. We also have a weekly kind of Q&A series that we do with our audience where we ask them, what questions do you have, right? And so all these things work to inform the content that we develop both in app and outside of the app. When I say expertly crafted, I think one of the things that we're working towards, and one of the ways our content is evolving, is a shift towards kind of modular based, almost curriculum style educational content. So people still have the flexibility to consume as they'd like, so self-directed, but really kind of putting a little bit more structure around key themes and topics that are top of mind for folks, so that people can better engage and more effectively engage with their learning goals. Anything to add?
Yeah.
Nope, that was perfectly done.
And so I'm curious to hear maybe a little bit more about when education is introduced to the person, is it incremental as they feel ready, or is it something that is prompted as you see action on the platform? Yeah,
so currently we kind of deliver content on a semi-regular basis. And so our goal is not to overwhelm users at the onset, because we know that was one of the key problem points that people expressed. And so, like I said, it's still flexible in the sense that folks can engage as they'd like, but we're still thoughtful about how we release, when we release, and the kind of sequence between topics.
All right, thank you. Another question we have here. Have you found that your early users are first-time investors, or have they come from other platforms or investing instruments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's been a little bit of a combination of both, right? So we've had a number of users who I would call kind of engage supporters who are a little bit higher income, some folks who might have some investment products, but are aligned from mission standpoint and kind of have a desire to kind of shift towards a more mission aligned product like ours. But I would say the vast majority of folks that we've seen so far have been kind of first time amateur and experienced investors. And so we've really been pleased to see that impact that we've had in that space.
And do you have a way to see what behaviors come after they start investing in your app? So I'm thinking here, do they start investing in retirement accounts or investing in 529s, I guess, for the people who have children, or just does that expand their access or the reach for other products out there? Are you curious?
Trevor, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to tracking progress, we have standard like data strategies and practices that allow us to see how people are engaging with the app and different inflection points in the user journey, both from the top of funnel at the start of onboarding all the way through, and certainly touching on some of the points that almost have made about content engagement, contribution amounts, and things of that nature. So we're working through that process as you would typically expect. In terms of product offerings itself, we don't currently offer 529s or 401k plans. We will certainly move into strategies that are more tax efficient over time, but in this first iteration of the product, it is just a standard trading account that people can access long-term strategies in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so that's awesome. So yeah, so that would be like in your roadmap. Curious to see how much starting to invest, like for new investors, how much that influences their desire, or how much that expands kind of their world of understanding what tools are out there in general. So that's awesome. There's another question here. So someone in the audience is curious about how you're measuring financial wellness impacts. So are you using standardized tools, customized surveys, or interviews, or tracking behaviors of your users?
It's actually a combination of all of those things. So standardized tools, focus group conversations and studies, certainly experiences like the partnership we have with Prudential and SFI will help. And so we will continue to go through that process. Obviously, we're an FSL alum, and part of our participation in the cohort and the accelerator program is obviously with an intense focus on impact metrics and how we are actually contributing to the impact goals and objectives that we had set out for upon entry into the program. And so working with the team, I actually just had a call with members of the team before this, as we were working through the tracking and process of trying to understand some of those impacts that we're having.
All right. Can you say more, switching gears a little bit here, can you say more about the gap in PMF with companies that are purely focused on providing alternative banking options for Black people? Wondering if you have any more theories on what those platforms are not understanding about their target audience.
I wouldn't be very clear. Like I think that those platforms are great, and we support the work that they are doing, and certainly know just how difficult it is to start any type of company, and believe that we need to see other diverse, underrepresented founders and founding teams out here doing this work. The point that I was making is just that understanding the financial products themselves and what are the things that actually drive wealth creation and wealth generation over time. And so, again, I made the point earlier that nearly half of this population is underbanked. Like, we need banking solutions. I just want to be very clear with the communication and education that we're giving to this community, because it's not the case that having a bank account alone can help you build wealth, right? And that's an important distinction. And I felt And I still feel that we're talking about a community of people that have historically been sold a bill of goods, right? And in 2022, almost 23, we all know better. And I just want to be very clear about the requirements and the pathways to build wealth. And as long as we are increasing solutions and opportunities for people within our community, I think that is the right path forward.
Yeah, and I love what you said about that, because so I was a financial coach way back when, and so in my experience helping people, it was about having a savings account and building savings, or putting money under a mattress, and money is actually losing value there, right? And so how are you helping empower people to understand the value of these products, or understand that only saving is not going to get you to where you want to be? So I love that. Another question here from the audience: what mediums are you finding to be most effective in delivering the educational content? We're seeing almost 25% of the users who seek out and use our educational content online identify as Black, and this seemed to line up with Commonwealth research. So wondered if you had any data about the best ways to engage with access points that are created for the education. Trust seems to be a hurdle because of the way the system have kept Black and brown folks marginalized through history.
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think so as I said earlier, we've really tried to take a two-pronged approach of delivering our content both in-app, so to folks who are subscribed users, paying users, as well as to our broader external audience, so folks that are engaging with us via social media. Because the idea really is to attack the barriers to trialability. We know that transparency and kind of more information makes folks more likely to actually do the desired behavior, which in this case would be to invest. And so we've definitely utilized both mediums. In terms of format, you know, as I said, we're moving towards a more of a modular based format. And I think currently we've been testing video versus long form versus reel. And I think it's still early days to see what's resonating the most, frankly, but our goal is to be as flexible as we can and make sure that we are in a discovery driven kind of mode, and make sure that our content is actually resonating as desired. So hopefully that kind of answers the question there. I know there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's super helpful to understand. And yeah, it is important to understand also how the target market receives information in a way that is trustworthy, and understand that. So I do have a question in terms of what is the perception of the amount of financial education that is needed to start investing versus what is actually needed to start investing? Because I have seen in the industry a lot of times there's this perception that like people need to know a lot, and then, but yeah, so want to get your thoughts about that.
So I think the perception is that the bar is higher than what it actually is. And I think there's a number of different factors in play here. The reality is there are products in the market that do a really efficient and effective job of helping people get exposure into the markets in a well-diversified way that can help them grow and amass wealth over time. And people should utilize those products. I think, you know, education is extremely important, and delivering education in culturally competent ways is something that is severely lacking within the broader industry and market. And that is what we endeavor to do at Stackwell. But I think when I personally consider the importance of education, it comes down to agency. Like, I don't want to just have us deliver a product to the market that automates everything and people never think or consider what is actually happening on their behalf. Like, I want people to have agency in this process. I want them to feel more comfortable and feel like they know exactly why this product is doing what it's doing and how it is benefiting them over the long term. So while you don't necessarily have to be an expert to get started, our hope is that over time we will help you understand and better contextualize what is happening in the market, contextualize what risk actually means, which is a huge limiting factor in terms of people's participation, and get people more grounded with what this process actually means and how to best participate, and how to, as much as you can, eliminate some of the unnecessary risks that could potentially be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So yeah, I think we're at time. We could continue talking about this forever. But yeah, Trevor and Omosepe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up the session, is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with?
First of all, just thank you all for being here with us today and giving us the opportunity to talk to you all about the important work that we're doing. We all fundamentally believe that partnership is critical as we move forward and extend our reach and have impact on more lives. We're super excited to be a part of this community with the Financial Health Network, and certainly the folks at FHN and FSL know how to get in touch with us, and would really welcome any opportunities to talk to other potential partner orgs about community-based programming that we could enter into, or even product distribution and opportunities to help ensure that we get the best possible financial products into the hands of the community of people that we're trying to serve, so that we can promote greater and important wealth building outcomes. So thank you all for being here with us, giving us a little bit of your time today, and we'll look forward to talking to you all soon.
All right, yeah.
Thank you, appreciate you moderating this.
Of course, yeah. Thank you so much again. Before we close, I just wanted to share a recent milestone from our exchange program. We recently announced our latest cohort of fintech and nonprofit partnerships who are working to improve benefits-related pain points in financial coaching, housing, and childcare. You can learn more about these grantees by visiting our Financial Solutions Lab website. Next slide, please. In closing, I'd like to thank our speakers, the FHN events team, and all of you for joining us today. I hope this conversation has helped spark ideas for you and your work. This is an important topic and one that we will certainly continue working towards. If you would like to continue this conversation with us, we encourage you to reach out to us via email or any of our social media channels, and a team member will be in touch. And with that, thanks again and happy holidays, everyone.